Good afternoon. I hope everybody had enough to eat and got warmed up. I've heard a couple comments, a little chilly in here, but folks said they actually enjoyed it being cold instead of hot. I was looking at the sign. It says peer review yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And I was just sitting in the back of the room thinking about today's presentation. And I was trying to think of things in threes, and I was thinking the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I said, no, I can't go with that one. And then I saw yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and I said, well, it's kind of more like Christmas Carol, so I guess I'm the ghost of Christmas past as I start this off. The other thing I noted, it was interesting listening to Colleen and Maria's presentation earlier today, noting that the trends in substandard peer reviews since the early 90s. And if you recall that slide, I wish I could bring it up, but it started out in the early 90s, about 23% were bad, then it went down to about 19, and then all the way up to 39% substandard now. Back in 1996, when I was in public accounting, I actually was an auditor of employee benefit plans, and I actually was a technical reviewer for my firm of audits. So I like to think now, seeing those statistics, that I certainly made an impact on our profession in the quality of audits being done yesterday versus today. Let me give you a little history, I guess, a little history lesson. I'm sure some of you have heard this. Certainly the executive directors who are in the room experienced this for the last couple of years. Ian Dingwall, who's the chief accountant of the Employee Benefit Security Administration at the Department of Labor, presented at both the 2013 and 2014 executive directors conferences. He discussed things like concerns with audits of pension plans subject to ERISA, their prior experience with auditors called dabblers, or those who did one or two employee benefit plan audits. He also disclosed that DOL would often refer substandard audits to the AICPA because it was his understanding, or in what we learned later on, it was almost like an urban legend, that in the 20-plus years before he started, or when he started with DOL, he was told that state boards were not reactive to referrals from the DOL. I will tell you, witnessing that conference in 2013, that the executive directors in the room were not happy because they were not getting referrals and they had not been contacted, and certainly it was a call to arms for them. And he was invited back in 2014 and certainly had a great dialogue then. And he also talked about, in 2013, initiating a project with the AICPA to verify that all auditors of pension plans were participating in peer review. About the same time, AICPA staff had determined that some firms, we're going to figure this out by the end of the day. There we go. About the same time, AICPA staff was becoming increasingly aware that firms were failing to do certain things, including enrolling in peer review, having the appropriate type of peer review, meaning an engagement review versus a system review, and certainly the possibility that they weren't including must-select engagements in their peer review. They weren't notifying their peer review team of the types of engagements, audit engagements they were performing. So NASBA initiated contact, certainly with the affected state boards of accountancy, the Department of Labor, as well as the AICPA, to determine and understand what the issues were, truly to assess the magnitude of the issue, because we had heard a lot of different stories, and then provide information to the boards on possible remedies or actions that they could take. And you may recall that last year in March and May and again in August, we sent emails to executive directors and/or board chairs informing them and updating them on what was occurring. This slide took a lot of effort on my part, and I had the assistance of the New York staff. What I was really hoping to do is to show you a standard system review report which includes must-selects. In that paragraph in green, I saw another slide that used green earlier. It was a little difficult to read. I hope you guys can see it in the back. But really what it is that one paragraph that every peer review report should have if a accounting firm has a peer review that includes must-selects. And must-selects include engagements performed under government audit standards, audits of employee benefit plans, audits performed under the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation Improvement Act of 1991, audits of carrying brokers and dealers, and examinations of service organizations. So if an accounting firm did any of those types of services, they should notify their peer review team, and those should automatically, at least one should be selected for peer review. The lack of that paragraph in a firm's peer review report suggests that the firm did not conduct, in this case, EBP audits, employee benefit plan audits, or any other type of must-select. One of the things we hoped to do was to point out to boards that they could very easily determine if, based on the data we provided all the boards with samples of who the peer reviewers were, that they could easily determine if those firms had had the right peer review by going to the AICPA's facilitated state board access and viewing the peer review reports of the firms in their states. Part of the DOL project, AICPA staff completed their review of peer review reports and found certainly several issues that came to pass, including failure to identify EBP audits as part of their audit sample, their peer review sample. They had to have a step-up review. That is, they took on an employee benefit plan audit and failed to notify the peer reviewer that they had taken that and had a step up in the review, or had an annual filing that they didn't even do an A&A, any type of A&A work. So they claimed that they were exempt from peer review when in fact they were doing EBP audits. So again, I hope the slides look good and they're readable in the back. So there were 4,918 firms that were part of this project, and as you can see, 79% were found to be in compliance, 21% were found to be non-compliant. Of those 21%, 11 were enrolled but had omitted employee benefit plan audits in their peer review sample, and 10% did not even claim that they did audits, and they were referred to professional ethics for further investigation. A little further down, of the 11% enrolled but that omitted EBP, 2% had peer reviews in process, while 9 had been recalled, accelerated, or had a stepped-up review, and so on. You can see the other stats. So, state board actions. It was kind of interesting, my role at NASBA and working with the state boards, because I got a number of phone calls from states and actually dug in quite deeply with a couple of boards on this issue. And we found that some boards could take actions for audits completed in their jurisdiction, while others could not do that because their statutes only allowed them to investigate and prosecute accounting firms if the plan sponsor was located in their jurisdiction. Most boards, and certainly the executive directors talked about this at their conference last year and again this year, most boards took initial action of verifying that the audit firm was registered or licensed in their state. In some cases, there was a failure to register that resulted in fines against the audit firm. For example, one state sanctioned a firm $5,000. They found that the firm had done EBP audits in their state for 10 years, and they fined them $500 per year or $5,000 for failure to register. In some cases, other boards resolved to treat the failure to register as an administrative action, deciding to not take action against the audit firm itself, but to bring it into compliance by requiring it to register with the state board. Similarly, actions were taken by boards with respect to firms that failed to comply with the jurisdiction's peer review statute. Again, some issued administrative warnings requiring firms to have their peer review conducted and wanted copies of peer review reports, and they treated them just as an administrative warning. Others treated it as an ethics violation. They felt that if a CPA failed to notify and knowingly notify their peer review team that they were required to have an EBP audit as part of their peer review sample, that was really an ethics violation. And they sought sanctions. And certainly there were monetary sanctions that were also taken. John Johnson and I heard another story of a firm in Tennessee who actually operates in 10 different jurisdictions. And they faced the entire gauntlet. They had administrative warnings, they had sanctions against them. It just depended on which of those 10 states they were operating in. So it really was all across the board. More information on what boards did with respect to yesterday can certainly be found in the April responses to the focus questions that we sent out to you all not too long ago. We asked for input from boards on what you had done with respect to peer review. So there's a great summary in the focus questions from a number of boards. So that kind of gives you a brief overview of what happened in the past with respect to this project. I'm going to have Janice come up now and tell you about some changes to the peer review program. I'm still not sure where it's going.
Now, if I can just figure the clicker out. Preface my presentation today with I'm going to be speaking and mentioning the board quite a few times. And when I'm talking about the board, it's not the NASBA board, it's not boards of accountancy, it is the peer review board. So if I say the board, I'm talking about the peer review board, just so you understand that. Going to talk a little bit about some of the changes that the board has made. We're going to start with some actions that the board has done to strengthen firm quality. There are new procedures in place related to firm and individual licensure. These have been developed in order to address the public's perception and expectation of the peer review program, to improve the program's credibility, and to affirm the commitment of the profession to quality. These new requirements were approved in 2014 in the fall, and the guidance that has been issued should help firms to comply with Squash 8. Squash 8 controls the quality control standard that firms have to comply with. And in that standard, it says that firms must comply with regulatory and legal requirements. So this hopefully will give some guidance to firms and help them better comply. Some of the new procedures will be that the firm will have to provide the peer reviewer some information through the completion of some updated guidance in the peer review program as to what their policies are to ensure that their firm is registered not only in its state domicile, its home state, but also in other states where it might be practicing. And it will also include individual registrations, individual licenses. How that will be tested is that on a firm, the firm will have to provide documentation to the peer reviewer showing that the date on their license is appropriate for the peer review time period, and also for the time that the engagements were performed. In a system review, that will be done systemically by a random selection of personnel. In an engagement review, it will be done by testing those individuals who worked on the engagements that get selected. There we go. The next subject we're going to cover is the engagement listing completeness. I want to remind everyone that the changes that were enacted by the peer review board related to engagement completeness stem directly from the analysis performed by the peer review board staff on the 4,918 firms that Dan had in his slide, where there was 21% non-compliance. And that 4,918 firms is not the total population of firms that perform EBP audits. That population was the firms that were provided that were not members of the AICPA Employee Benefit Quality Center. So of that, there were more than 1,000 firms that did not have a completed client listing. That happened a couple of ways. One, the firm had an engagement review. Those of you that are not familiar with peer review, an engagement review doesn't look at audits. It only looks at compilations and reviews, and in some states SARS 8 engagements. Therefore, you select certain engagements to review, and you are not permitted to have that kind of review if you do audits. If you do audits, you are supposed to have a system review. So two things happened. One, a firm had an engagement review, and they should have had a system review because they did an EBP audit and perhaps even did other audits. The second case was the firm did have a system review but failed to include on their client listing, their representations, their discussions with their peer reviewer. They failed to disclose that they had an EBP or a must-select engagement. So there were some changes made. The firms were given warnings. Emails were sent to all firms that had AICPA members that were sent to the managing partner. The peer review board encouraged state societies to let their members know that completeness was going to be an issue. Also, reviewers were instructed to discuss with their peer review client that it was imperative that their lists be complete. I mean, you would think they would know that, but anyway, that was also discussed with peer reviewers. The second thing was a revised representation letter was developed. There had been a representation letter. This letter has been enhanced. One of the requirements in the letter is that you are agreeing in this letter that you understand that if you provide incorrect information and it's discovered subsequently, that representation letter will be maintained until you have your next peer review, and it could be used as prima facie evidence of non-cooperation. So what's going to happen in the future if there are misrepresentations? I kind of stole a little bit of Dan's. That was kind of what happened in the past. So what is going to happen in the future? Well, in the future, if a firm omits or misrepresents information about its accounting and auditing practice that results in a material departure from peer review standards, the peer review acceptance letter will be recalled, and other aspects of the recall guidance will be appropriate. So what that could mean as state boards is that you have a firm that had a peer review 2 years ago, and subsequently it was discovered that they had engagements they had not included. You may have to deal with, and some of the states have already dealt with this, but you may have to be dealing with situations where did you have an appropriately licensed firm? The firm will become subject to one of two things. They could be terminated from the program, there could be a hearing panel, and there could be other consequences that that hearing panel might have. If they are terminated, if they want to re-enroll in the peer review program, they would have to go through a second hearing panel in order to be approved to re-enroll. So what happens on this no annual A&A? In other words, I've submitted my letter to the administering entity as my firm and said, I don't do any accounting and auditing engagements. Well, if you do that in the future, it will be automatic termination from the program. Re-enrollment will be required. You will be required to go through a hearing. The board will be notified that you have been terminated, and the revised A&A letter has language in it that makes that very clear. So hopefully the firm is reading that letter. One of the things that the AICPA is working on is to obtain EIN numbers from firms. And they're doing that in the hopes that they will be able to use that information to match public databases. For instance, DOL EFAST, the Federal Audit Clearinghouse for single audits, and HUD's REACT system. Other databases are being looked at, and also the AICPA and NASBA are exploring how using the ALD might be incorporated within the process using encrypted information. Of course, none of this will be done with ALD without full support of state boards. NASBA is in the process of attempting to identify a pilot state. I know they've got a couple in mind to test how this process might work. The ALD committee also is very involved in this process. Also, in relation to firm quality, as you all know, you've heard SARS-21 was issued in October of 2014. It is effective for financial statements as of after December 15th, 2015, with early implementation permitted. So SARS-21 basically attempted to revise the standards for reviews, compilations, and created preparation engagements. As a result of this, the peer review board spent a lot of time on how to modify the standards to incorporate the new services and the compilation and review standards. One of the things that the board determined is that if a firm only performs preparation engagements, that's the only service they offer, they are not required to enroll in a peer review program. However, if a firm is enrolled in a peer review program, then preparation services are in scope. In other words, they could be selected. Although in a system review, I think it might be unlikely that a preparation service might be selected, although it could happen if that partner only did that particular type of work. In a engagement review, there are several circumstances where preparation might be selected. One, it's the only engagement that particular partner that issues those. That's the only type of engagement he does or she does. It might be the only engagement the firm does that contains disclosures. So if it was the only full disclosure engagement, it would be selected. There are some other examples, and we'll cover those tomorrow in our presentation. The peer review program has been based on the principle that a systemic monitoring and educational process is the most effective way to high quality performance throughout the profession. In order to more responsively deliver on that underlying principle, the peer review board approved revised guidance related to a firm's receipt of consecutive non-passing peer review reports. The revised guidance requires notification to firms that if they are receiving a pass with deficiency or a fail report, they must be notified via certified mail or its equivalent. So basically, if the guidance that the board has come up with is if you have 2 consecutive non-pass reports, that would be pass with deficiencies and a second pass with deficiencies. A fail, a pass with deficiencies, or a pass with deficiencies and then a fail, that there should be a mandatory assessment of referral to a hearing panel. If there are 2 back-to-back fail reports, it's a presumptively mandatory referral to the panel, to a hearing panel. And at the point you receive 3 non-pass reports, it becomes mandatory that it go to a hearing panel. The Compliance Assurance Committee this past year issued some guidance related to what we deemed in our committee to be best practices for peer review oversight committees to follow. That guidance is on the Peer Review Oversight Committee's PROC webpage at NASBA. I also know that information has been included in the Enforcement Committee guidance. So there are a couple of places you can get that information. Our guidance is somewhat similar to the peer review board's guidance. However, we are suggesting that, you have to look at the circumstances and you may want to send it to enforcement at the conclusion of 2 non-pass reports. So it's a little different, so you should take a look at it. So we've talked a lot about firm issues. Those issues are all related to the firm. So let's talk a little bit about actions that the peer review board has taken to attempt to improve and enhance reviewer quality. Last year, the board undertook, in order to jumpstart some of the high-risk quality issues, an initiative. It was a pilot program to do enhanced oversights of peer review engagements that were performed by peer reviewers. The board has always selected certain engagements, a certain percentage, and done what they call a desk review. These engagements were done a little bit differently. There were a total of 90 oversights of must-select engagements that were selected. The reviewers of those engagements were subject matter experts that are part of the Audit Quality Center Experts panel. All were done on a surprise basis. So if I was the team captain on one of those engagements, I did not know that my peer review and that engagement had been selected to be reviewed. So after all of the papers were sent in to the administering entity, then those work papers were called in and they were sent to the AICPA, who distributed them to the subject matter experts, who then did a review. The results are not very pretty. It's very disillusioning. The statistics as of June 15th, there are 4 of the 90 oversights that are not completed. The peer reviewers identified 10% of the engagements as non-conforming. The subject matter experts identified 42% of the must-selects that were non-conforming. The poor-performing reviewers were subject to corrective action or removal as a reviewer from the program. In 2015-16, they plan to expand this particular review. It will be a larger sample. They're going to do a little bit more work, not only on what maybe the reviewer missed, but looking at the root cause from the firm's perspective. How did it occur? Why did the firm fail? What are the reasons? Some of these oversights will be performed in the firm's office. Effective December 31, 2015, there are changes in the reviewer requirements. One, you must have been practicing public accounting for the last 5 years. Two, you have to have experience at the level you're reviewing. So if you're reviewing an audit, you must currently be in the audit practice, either as a preparer, a reviewer, or as part of your firm's quality control, the system. If you're reviewing an engagement with disclosures, you have to be working in an area where you prepare disclosures. So if I'm in my firm and I only do preparation services with no disclosures, I would not be qualified to look at a financial statement with full disclosure. And I think those are good changes. There are going to be additional requirements for must-select engagements. One of those requirements is that you must have what's called A-level experience. A-level experience is defined as presently involved in supervising or carrying out a quality control function on a firm's auditing engagements, and they must be an Audit Quality Center member, and that is for must-select engagements. Also going to have to maintain levels of performance. If a reviewer has some problems and they're given corrective action and they don't take care of it and they continue to have problems, they will be removed as a reviewer. Effective May, and this is really the May 5th date should be May 1, not May 5. That was a typo that didn't catch. There's going to be a lot of change in this area as to what will qualify to be an initial reviewer. I'm not going to go into all the details on that. Jim Brackens and I have a session tomorrow, and if you're interested in knowing what those are, you're welcome to come to our session. But there are going to be changes to the initial review. There are also changes on continuing reviews on the CPE requirements. There are also going to be certain required training if you're going to do must-select engagements. These must-select engagements are all in industries that have specialized characteristics. And if you don't know those characteristics as a reviewer, you might end up spending, if you're a good reviewer, you might end up spending a lot of extra time doing that peer review. But the bottom line is that you probably should not be doing the review if you don't have the expertise. These changes will be effective for reviews after May 1, 2016, and that's important because that education will need to be obtained over the next 12 months. These are some additional items that are under consideration. I actually got a list from Jim Brackens and Kim Ellis as to what the Standards Task Force itinerary kind of looked like. It's big. They have a lot of items on their agenda, but these are three that I think are really important for us. One is strengthening the peer review approach to evaluating the design of a firm's quality control. The next item is enhancing requirements for corrective actions when certain non-conforming engagements detected during a peer review regardless of the grade. And so let's say I have my peer review, and remember that it's a review of my system of quality control. And so my peer reviewer looks at 15, 20 engagements, and I just breeze through, out of 15, I breezed through 14 of them with not a no answer. But I took on that A133 engagement, and it becomes apparent that I maybe didn't have all of the expertise I needed to have to do that audit. And so that audit is non-conforming. But I passed my peer review because overall I have a good system. I had a problem with one engagement. So they're looking at, perhaps having an ability to do corrective action, even though you might have a past peer review. Then last is streamlining the removal of firms that fail to properly complete the required corrective actions. And I think that's very important to us as state board members. We need to, these firms that are not willing to meet the quality requirements need to not be practicing in our jurisdictions. So that concludes that. I do want to put a plug in. I know Walter and Ken mentioned the Peer Review Oversight Conference that's going to be held in Nashville on July the 10th. Peer Review Oversight Committees are a really important part of this process to ensure as a state board that we know the process is working from an administrative standpoint. So if you have an interest, you can email it. I think the registration's on the NASBA website, and it's pretty easy to get registered. So just want to put a plug in for our conference. And Mike, Fritz is going to tell us about the future.
Based on what you've heard from Dan and Janice, I think the profession and as regulators, we have a journey before us that can take us down one of two paths. Both paths are headed in a direction of assisting state boards in the regulation of CPAs and in protecting the public interest. Going to the left, we can go down a path that is a trailhead marked with low to moderate difficulty, assuming that the quality of all audits are equal and that all peer reviews are being performed by qualified independent firms. What hazards might we see on trailheads as we go down that path? Well, one, as you've heard, we could continue to see failed inspections by the DOL, resulting in potential increased government oversight of employee benefit plan audits. Secondly, the planned 2018 review of the new Uniform Grant Guidance, or the old A133 audits, may show similar failures to the last PCIE report, even those performed by members of the AICPA Government Quality Center. Again, potentially increasing the risk of additional government oversight. Third, as a part of the state board's investigations and disciplinary actions, the quality of peer reviews may be further questioned. Or maybe we go down the path on the right. We can decide to take a new journey where the trailhead is rated as moderate to slightly difficult, but over time becomes less moderate and is providing some views from vistas that we've not seen before. For instance, state boards are provided with more timely information of quality audits performed by registered firms and the quality indicators that individual licensees might have. License holders and firms are provided with real-time insights on ways to avoid audit pitfalls and tools that allow them to increase the quality of their audits. Firms performing peer reviews are provided with information that allows them to improve the quality of their own peer review inspections. In Ken Bishop's newsletter recently, he noted that there was a shared goal of all of the vice chairs as they did their interviews and going through that process, and that was that we need to increase the quality of the audit profession. In my role as regional board director, I've observed that all of the NASBA board members concur with that initiative. Over the past year, the Compliance Assurance and Regulatory Response Committees have responded to the discussion and concept papers that the AICPA has provided on the screen. The AICPA also has reviewed the comments received on this and issued in May of 2015 a 6-point audit quality plan that I would encourage you all to take a look at if you haven't seen it. It talks about some of the things that they are already doing, and also it talks about some of the things that Janice has talked about in terms of what the Peer Review Oversight Committee has done. There were several key concepts in our response, in NASBA's response to the Enhancing Audit Quality paper, as you see on the screen. Again, some of those things have already been included in what Janice has talked about, but we did indicate that we felt that there needed to be importance of due care, competence, and diligence within the peer review process. We felt that, as she mentioned before, that peer reviewers for special industries did in fact need to have special qualifications before he or she could in fact do those special reviews of the high-risk areas. And we also felt that there should be enhanced curriculum that would allow for contents and methods of instruction to support those typical or those topical areas for professional services. The next video slide I would then indicate to you is something that, here's something, I'm sorry, went too far. The slide, as you can see, is something that the AICPA has got put out in terms of the next comment letter we're going to talk about. And I apologize to those of you that may have seen it before, but I thought it would be good for the members that haven't seen it to see, in fact, what this enhancing of the audit process and what the peer review of the future might look like. So here, I'll tee it up.
Imagine, in the not-too-distant future, a proactive practice monitoring system that provides a bird's-eye view of your firm's accounting, auditing, and attest engagements, anytime, anywhere. One that alerts the quality control partner and any other audit partners or staff to potential audit quality issues. One that notifies your firm when key performance metrics have not been met and when analysis has been completed on an engagement in near real time. Over the past 2 years, AICPA Task Force has envisioned a practice monitoring system for today's complex and changing business environment that makes full use of technology, one that captures data presently difficult to obtain and measure. Now we are sharing our vision through a concept paper so that together we can provide an avenue for the transformation of peer review. In developing this purposely thought-provoking concept, the team focused on providing key benefits such as increased transparency for stakeholders, improved detection of engagement issues and remediation of risks, enhanced engagement monitoring, and faster delivery of information. Firms will be better able to strategically identify and plan the number and needed expertise of staff with the new systems technology platform. It would provide small, medium, and large firms assurance that a commitment to quality is pervasive through all aspects of the firm. Going forward, the useful data captured by the system could enable the AICPA to develop even more effective accounting, auditing, and attestation training and improvement tools. What if the future of practice monitoring could be held in the palm of your hand? The AICPA is looking for your feedback to help shape the future. Come to our website, read the concept paper, join the discussion.
Responses to that comment letter were due by June the 15th, and I put these slides together before we actually had our NASBA response letter issued, but we did issue it on June the 10th this past year, and if you want to see that letter, there's actually copies of it out at the desk, at the registration desk, if you'd like to see it. The peer review process has been one of the key pieces of enhancing audit quality for over 35 years. 53 of the jurisdictions have adopted legislation which requires peer review. In our letter, we commented that we believe that there can be improvements to audit quality by the utilization of technical innovation, optimal risk management, and timely, transparent results of an oversight process. Our response provided some examples of specific engagement quality indicators that could be used by a firm to internally monitor its quality process. These examples were based on input from members of various size firms. Examples included reviewing client service hours by level, percentage of field work completed before the client's year end, potentially allowing for more timely identification of potential audit issues and reducing staff hours and peak times, timely partner involvement in critical areas of the audit, capturing the number of restatements and analyzing the root causes of audit failures, and reducing the hours incurred after the issuance of the report. Those are some examples that I've seen actually in action at various firms, including my own firm at Deloitte, where we've done some of these engagement quality indicators. And I will tell you that we have seen increased quality as a result of some of those indicators. We did express some concern over how small and medium-sized firms may be able to provide information into a national standardized database. Some firms utilize manual systems, and some may use systems that are not compatible to a standardized database. Our largest concern was making sure that the oversight process of state boards of accountancy are factored into any changes in a system that is developed. It is not clear whether a nationally driven technology system would allow individual state boards the oversight process that it needs to be an effective regulator. We also expressed a desire that any changes to the current system be run in a parallel process for a significant period of time, as it will take time for the legislative process to adopt the new peer review standards. Lastly, we noted that peer reviews can only be effective and succeed if their work is supported by appropriate consequences and effective support mechanisms. Enhancing the quality of a peer reviewer is also a critical element to any changes in the practice monitoring process. In conclusion, I do believe that there can be continued dialogue and cooperation between the ICPA and NASBA to ensure the future of peer review process improves audit quality and protects the public interest. So I do believe we will hopefully go down that right-hand side of the path. I will open it up to any questions.